7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks now since I first went into quarantine here in Los Angeles, and the hair had gotten a little bit wild child. You know, not anything distressing, just looked a little bit on the 70s side. So I was like, you know what? It's time for me to give myself a haircut. How bad could it be? I said to myself. I used to do this in college. When I had nothing, and so I looked around the house because I thought I had like the kind of shears that you buy when you give your kids a haircut.
Yeah.
And I was like, surely I have those around the house. Couldn't find them. Found some like beard trimmer things that are kind of approximately human hair cutters, right?
Oh, good Lord.
And I'm like, all right, family, Daddy's going to be over here in this corner of the backyard with the mirror set up and just cutting his hair, right?
Oh, no.
So, Brad, it is a series of errors that go, well, I'm going a little shorter. Well, going to have to go a little shorter.
Oh, no.
Until I eventually get to what I'm about to show you. So now for the folks at home, you obviously can't see me, but I have a hat on currently. And I'm about to pull the camera closer and turn this, let me turn this light on.
Oh, the suspense is killing me.
Let me turn this light on. So, Brad, I haven't had a haircut like this since I was 5 years old. You ready? Here we go.
I'm ready.
I'm taking the headphones off. Here comes the hat, and
oh my God! You look like a gym teacher from 1963. It's low and tight. It's tight on the sides, and it's just buzzed right across the top.
Yeah, it's a high and tight, and I think I kind of look like either a column A is I look like a shaved goose. That's column A. Column B is I look like a drill sergeant from like Camp Pendleton that used to come to visit my school when I was a kid and help out with PE. I don't hate it, but boy, is it not my look. It's just, I look like I'm in the Marine Corps, and
This could be a difficult show, because I'm already intimidated by you.
Well, Brad, you can't handle the truth. That's the problem. So anyway, I got to tell you, I approximated with artist hands pretty good on the front and the sides. The back, I'm not even going to show you the back because it is a hot mess. Not only can I do poorly on the back, Gloria came by and she's like, no, I'm making it worse because she doesn't have, bless her, artist hands. She's got, writers.
Right.
Writers hands.
Thank God from what I'm looking at the screen for artist hands.
You tremendous jerk.
Imagine how terrible that could be if you didn't have artist hands.
Well, it's even worse in the back. Okay, so the razor locked up on us about 3/4 of the way through, and I couldn't find any oil to get it unlocked because they require like a little bit of like a vibratory oil to keep moving, kind of a thing.
A little vibratory oil, sure.
Anyway, it locked up on me, and there is a patch on the back of my head that I couldn't shave.
What do you got, like a rat tail or a mullet going? You can't be a mullet. Oh my God! Oh my God!
Can you see it?
Yes. Okay, so for the people at home,
I'm like, I go to Glow. I'm like, we gotta fix this. I can't just have this patch on the back of my head. Yeah. She's like, what are you, the queen? Who are you trying to impress? Where are you going? Who do you have to see? And she's like, it's just me, and I'm facing you most of the time, so who cares?
and now I'm facing you more often than I ever did now.
Yeah,
because
you see her like swing around to talk to me. She's like, no, I'm gonna come around to this side of the fridge.
I'm gonna talk to you from the front for once. For the people at home, it is completely shaved around back, but on the just left of center, there is a roughly rectangular patch of long hair. It's bizarre.
It doesn't look intentional. It doesn't look like, because you could. Glow at one point was like, well, we could give you a mohawk, and I was like, yeah, I'm willing to go with the mohawk because we were really messing up a lot.
Yeah,
and then we got to this patch at the back, and the thing just seized up. And you can't do with scissors what you can do with a electric razor. You know what I mean? Like
you're walking proof of that. Yeah.
Brad, you also can't see on the video because it's not that close. But if you got up close to my hair, there's all these like sudden ridges and valleys where the scissors went in and cut my hair.
I know a guy that had brain surgery not too long ago, and he looks at that haircut and says, "Ooh, geez, Oh man, now listen, I'm exaggerating for the podcast. You look just fine.
Oh my God, that eye roll.
You look just fine.
Brad, you'll want to see an ophthalmologist about that eye roll. That was pretty painful looking. Well, on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody. Welcome to ComicLab, the show about giving yourself a bad haircut and making comics.
And making a beeline for the Flow Bee and comics.
It's sold out, Brad. It's apparently sold out.
I thought they stopped making it because, okay, now, this may be me completely conjuring things. I thought there were stories about it taking chunks of hair for some reason, and they stopped making it. But
oh, well, you know what? I can do that to myself in my own backyard. I don't need a Flow Bee to do that.
God knows what a tragedy that would be. And making a living from comics, I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
Oh, the creator of Evil Inc. Normally you say the cartoonist, but now you're the creator. Oh, what a pretty party. Oh. And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, the creator of Drive and Sheldon, and the creator of Stripped. Oh, more wine.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. Well, I may have messed up my hair, but the thing I did right, I had a very productive week, and a big shout out to the one of the companies making that possible in my quarantine, Wacom at WACOM.com.
Yes.
The sponsor of this week's show, and the new Wacom One, which I've been using like a happy little forest creature. Unfortunately, with a bad haircut, but I am a happy little forest creature. So we give a shout out to Wacom, and we suggest the new Wacom One at WACOM.com. And Bradley J. Geiger, the Pulitzer Prizes were announced this week over at the Pulitzer.com. I don't know where it is. I should have had that prepared.
At the Pulitzer.com.
At the PulitzerPrize.com. What's the website there? I don't know.
At Pulitzer.com. Yeah, sure. I'm sure that's where it is. I have no doubt that that's the actual URL. No doubt in my mind. But they announced the Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartooning, and it went to Barry Blitt, who does those watercolor covers for the New Yorker magazine.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, in terms of editorial cartooning, he doesn't light my world on fire. In other words, I think he's a great illustrator, a fantastic illustrator. But in terms of editorial cartooning, I don't know that for me that like lights me up. But I really don't care one way or the other. I've long since gotten rid of my fantasy of ever seeing my name there. But there was something I got to ask you because it's driving me nuts. I go to the Pulitzer. It's Pulitzer.org, by the way. I go to Pulitzer.org and it says Barry Blitt wins for work that skewers the personalities and policies emanating from the Trump White House with deceptively sweet watercolor style and seemingly gentle caricatures. Man, there I did. I always complain people can't pronounce caricature.
Well, what really sold it for you, Brad, was that you were also running out of breath as you said it, and also seemingly caricatures. You ran out of breath as you were saying it, which was delightful.
That was a long sentence. But then in parentheses, it says moved into contention by the board, and board is capitalized, so I assume it means the Pulitzer board.
Okay.
And I got to ask you, what does that mean?
So I think that because it is not a publicly voted on thing, it's private, right? The Pulitzer board does the nominations and then the final voting. I think if you get moved into contention, you're saying, okay, you're one of the 4 contendees that will be vying for the prize. And then they take a couple weeks, they look at your work, and then they go, all right, now, Brad Geiger, you're the winner, but you were also moved to contention for the board, kind of thing.
What? Now, I didn't follow any of that. I mean, I would assume that the board puts all of the nominees together.
Let's think of it in basketball terms. Moved to contention by the board is the final 4. And that's sports. Brad won't know that. Okay. Here's how we do it. Okay, I'm going to put it in terms that Brad can understand. You've got a big bag of M&Ms in front of you, which represent all the cartoonists in the country, right?
Right.
And you, Brad Geiger, select 4 of the orangey red M&Ms, and now those 4 are in contention by the board, right? Those are the finalists. You've picked those 4 M&Ms that you're going to eat, and then you're like, oh, which will be the Pulitzer Prize winner this year? Which one will Brad Geiger eat? And then the one that you pick and put in your mouth, that is the Pulitzer Prize winner. But all 4 were moved into contention by the board, right?
No.
Do I have that right?
No, because that's how all of the Pulitzers are run. In other words, the Pulitzer Committee has a way of singling out nominations, and then the board, I would imagine, decides which one is the winner. In other words, if you are correct, then every one of those awards would need that parenthetical that said moved into contention by the board, right? Because that's how they're all picked.
Oh, you're saying just editorial cartooning was, quote, moved into contention by the board.
Yes. And what I'm asking is, because
possibly you're saying contention in the sense of like this is being contested.
Nope. No. Okay. Follow me.
Oh, boy, I sure don't. Okay, let's go.
Also on the site, it said nominated as finalists in editorial cartooning, Kevin Gallagher, Lalo Alcaraz, and Matt Bors. From the nib, right? What I read that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, those were the nominees. They decided not to give it to any of the nominees. They moved this other guy into contention and gave him the award. Am I reading that right?
Because, no, you might. You know what? I have no idea. We have done zero preparation. As true to cartoonists, we've done zero preparation, so we have no idea.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting theory. That could be. They allow that in the Eisners too, where the judges get moved. Like if let's say Brad Geiger for whatever reason didn't get nominated, the judges could also look at. They can also create categories. Did you know that in the Eisners?
Yeah.
The judges have the power to create a category, being like. Best use of a Brad in comics by Brad Geiger, and you're the winner of the best use of a Brad, which I think is interesting. So you're saying in this case, the judges looked at their nominees, didn't like them, and said, "No, we're going to move Barry Blitt into contention." Oh, and he also won. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm asking because I'm not saying that happened. I'm asking if that's what that parenthetical means because it's the only one of the Pulitzer Prize winners that has that parenthetical statement moved into contention by the board. And so I don't know what else that could possibly mean.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I having done zero research into this, I think
if that's the case, could you imagine finding out that you were a nominee for the Pulitzer Prize with 2 other people, and none of you won it, and they decided to take a totally different person, put him in the running specifically so that they could win the prize? That would be that'd be worse than not being nominated.
You think so? I'd still be chuffed to be nominated for a Pulitzer.
Well, okay, yeah, I'm full of shit. I'd still love to be nominated, but I'd be very upset to find out that I got nominated and they decided, we're not going to give it to any of these guys. It's like that time that Stefan Pastis was up for the NCS award, and instead of give it to him, they made it a tie between the 2 other people.
You're right. It is a massive FU in a way. Yeah.
It was like we're not going to give it to you. We're going to give it to literally everybody we could have, but you.
That is literally a FU and the horse you rode in on kind of an award system.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So yes. So first of all, okay, I think you're right, and we can probably put that to bed that you're right. But I want to ask you this. Why is the Pulitzer, I know it is journalism focused, and I know editorial cartoonist is specifically editorially focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why, so 2 questions. Why did Bloom County win that one year? And why do they maintain that it has to be specifically editorial cartooning format for the most part?
That's a great question.
Because we all know what an editorial cartoon is when we see it, right? It's a very specific type of format.
Well, we used to back when newspapers dominated the media landscape.
That is true because both Lalo and Matt actually operate very differently.
Yeah,
to their great credit, actually.
Yeah, Matt does a lot of sequential work, as
does Lalo. Yeah.
So this idea of what an editorial cartoonist isn't as clear as it used to be, and also. And by the way, shouldn't be. In other words, they should also be considering animation and a whole lot more. And the fact that they're considering this illustrator as an editorial cartoonist is a good thing as well, because it opens up the scope. But Bloom County, if you look at the work that it was doing that year that it was awarded, absolutely was Pulitzer Prize political and editorial cartooning, without a doubt. And it was great that it got nominated and awarded.
Well, speak about being snubbed. Imagine being the best editorial cartoonist going that year. You're like, oh man, I'm up for a Pulitzer. This is going to be great. And then, hey ho, here comes Bloom County, and with a top down on a convertible, and it comes zooming in front of the country club, like, hey everybody, I'm Bloom County. How you doing? And then it wins a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah. Could you imagine being? So they had, during that time they had some amazing editorial cartoonists.
Oh yeah, the guy from the Chicago Tribune. What was his name?
Pat Oliphant.
Oliphant. Loker was big at that point. Anyway,
Tom Tolles.
Tom Tolles. Imagine how pissed they must all have been when a talking penguin won. That must have pissed them off.
The one year I did the one complete year that I did Fables, without my knowing, the Philadelphia Society of Professional Journalists nominated it as best local column, and it won. Now, there's a very few people that are really going to understand this, because in newspaper society, the columnist is like, their shit don't stink. They walk around, they keep their own hours, they work from home when they want to. A columnist is like a god among people.
Is it a version in journalism of what a tenured professor is in college?
Yes.
We're like, oh, I no longer give a shit because I'm now a tenured professor, so I can do whatever I want.
Well, I'm sure they still give a shit, but they nothing affects them. Nothing.
Right.
It's like everybody's working late because the Pope died. This columnist is filing from home, and then they'll get it in just before deadline. They're not worried about a GD thing. It's just that week after I was named the best local columnist in Philadelphia, it was really chilly in the newsroom for another couple weeks, because there was a lot of columnists that took a look at this cartoon that was being lauded as a columnist, and it was a little bit tense for a little while.
Yeah, it's a shame, because the same kind of thing happens with YA stuff, where I personally feel like Raina should be winning all the awards for young adult and children's fiction, but they do still segregate her work off to like the corner of children's fiction sometimes, and like it's not considered as hoity-toity, even though it is infinitely more impactful and touches more lives, and I think will stand the test of time better than a lot of the stuff that's winning the YA and children's literature book market, awards. Anyway, it's a shame that happens with cartooning, but anyway, so Brad, I think it's another year where I have been painfully passed over for a Pulitzer, and I think we can all look forward to another 55, 60 years of me being passed over for a Pulitzer. Go ahead.
But you've been passed over for the Pulitzer, but we're both still in the running for an Eisner, because they haven't announced those yet, and that means we haven't lost yet.
Let's just hope I get moved into contention by the board.
Let's face it, that's the way either one of us is going to win an Eisner, is if we get moved into contention.
I also feel like that's how I'm going to get sued someday. Oh, well, David's been moved into contention.
Oh, gosh. So, Dave, you had a topic you wanted to talk about on the show today, and I see it here in the show notes, and it is fascinating. And it has to do with stories that believe in themselves, and I want you to tell me what you mean by that.
Well, so, okay, I wanted to talk to you about how you can have a drama that's littered with comedy. You can have a comedy that's also littered or has a vein running through it of drama, right? And sometimes those can fight against each other. For example, you could have an editor or a producer or a director say about a script, no, this story is too serious to have this moment of levity, right? It breaks the mood of the story. It's no good. It fights against what the seriousness of the rest of the story is trying to do, right? First of all, that's not how life operates. There's moment of levity even in terrible tragedy as you try to survive, like as we all know right now. But I wanted to say this because I thought this might be a truism in terms of writing, which is that you can have comedy filter into drama and drama a filter into comedy, as we both know, because it works when the story believes in itself. When the comedy doesn't come in and do a sucker punch on the drama, the comedy is part of the drama. It's woven into, and it's the characters or the situation naturally presenting of like either a survival strategy in tragedy or a comedy, a moment of real life filtering into a moment of levity. And so, but in both cases, if the story believes in itself and the moments are natural, then it works. But the story has to believe in itself. When it doesn't, then it's willfully removing the fourth wall, right? And then it's editorializing on itself, and that's no good. So it's when it's naturally woven in and the story holds itself to its own rules and has a belief in itself as a story. And I for whatever reason, I really locked on that phrase, when a story believes in itself, and I like that. But I wanted to get your thoughts about what that might mean to you before we go further.
Well, one thing that I realize the more that I write, the more that I continue my journey as a writer, is that the more I realize as I look at my own stuff, is that there's actually very little difference between comedy and drama. They're both based on the exact same principle of tension and release.
Right.
And it's just a question of how you're releasing that tension that determines whether you're doing comedy and drama. And so I think your writing gets a little bit more mature.
My favorite word for Brad Geiger.
A little bit more nuanced when you're able to make that distinction to yourself and to focus. I'm not going to write comedy right now. I'm just going to do good writing. I'm going to write the best scene I can. And if that ends funny, great. And if that ends serious, great. And I guess maybe that goes to what you're saying is you have to believe in yourself to the extent that you can go whichever way based on what's best for the moment.
Yeah, that's true. And what I guess specifically what I was saying was when the story itself believes in itself, the characters aren't going, and this is broad strokes, so because obviously there's going to be exceptions, the characters aren't self-referencing the weirdness of a comedy moment in amidst a tragedy. They are rolling with it because this is their reality, right? For the characters itself, the reality always has to be accepted as a truism. Once that starts getting broken, or once there's a coyness to the insertion of humor, and then you remove the thin skein that is the suspension of disbelief, right?
Yeah.
And so for a story to work, the story itself, everyone involved in the story, all the characters involved, and the story itself, the plot line, has to believe in itself because that carries the suspension of disbelief. It helps. It gives the reader permission to say, no, this is a truth in this story, no matter how it's being played out.
Well,
I realize, by the way, as I'm saying this, that I sound like an incredibly high junior in college. Like, man, the truth of the story has to be, oh, man, Brad, I got to tell you, the story has to believe in itself, man. I sound like Dr. Teeth in the Electric Mayhem. That's what it is.
Well, let me rephrase that for you and see if I can get a little bit closer to where you're going. What you would say in that respect is that although breaking the fourth wall kind of humor it can be a very reliable way to get a joke or to make a moment, it also comes at a big cost because
that is very true.
Yeah,
yes.
Once you do that once or even twice, and I know I see some web cartoonists that rely on it like on a weekly, if not daily basis, right? Once you break that fourth wall, yes, you know that you can reliably get a laugh out of that. But it hurts your ability to go any deeper after that moment because you've broken the fourth wall.
Right.
And those characters have now said, I don't really believe that I'm in this moment. So your ability to effectively ramp up tension after that moment is hampered by your own doing.
Yes. So all the stories that still work but break the fourth wall, they have a character in it that essentially works as a mischief maker.
Yeah.
And so in their reality, the story still works because They still believe in the story because they themselves are the mischief maker.
Right.
It's like the Native American tradition of the coyote and how the coyote is always the mischief maker, or the Norse tradition of Loki and how he's the mischief maker. And if you notice, like in a Thor comic, there will be times where Loki will break the fourth wall because, or Deadpool will break the fourth wall because he is also a mischief maker. Bugs Bunny will break the fourth wall because he's a mischief maker. Rick and Morty will break the fourth wall because they're mischief makers. And so because their reality is itself mischief, their stories can still work. But when you or I do it, Brad, and we don't have a story that's based on a mischief maker, then we, like you said, we break our reality when we break that fourth wall. So yes, it makes a satisfying joke to do the wink towards the camera, Bugs Bunny style, but then you break the reality of your whole story, because then you're like, well, wait a minute. None of this has weight because the characters are aware that they are in a story. The characters are aware that this is a farce. And so the story, go ahead. You had a thought.
And if you have the wrong character do the wink, you can really shoot yourself in the foot, right? In other words, if you've got Bugs Bunny doing the wink, that's one thing. But if you've got another character doing it, if Granny does the wink,
Granny, you have a whole stable of Warner Brothers cartoon characters to go for, and you go for Granny? That's the character?
So I could have said Daffy Duck, but he's also a mischief maker. I could have said
you know what? And actually, Elmer Fudd also breaks the fourth wall sometimes, too.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to go to somebody who was a straight character, right?
Yeah, but God, they all break the fourth wall. You're right.
But then again,
you had to go third tier to Granny to get somebody that doesn't break the. She's the only reality in the story.
Listen, Looney Tunes was not written to ever go deeper than a certain point either. Right. I mean, and you could argue, well, but it did, those operas and so on.
It's not Aristophanes. I mean, it's a certain kind of storytelling. Yeah, go ahead.
But it's one thing to have one character who is a magic character or a mischief character. I'm watching the reruns of Community on Netflix right now and really enjoying it. Abed is a character that fits that mold. In other words, Abed can break the fourth wall. That's acceptable. You get that, and it doesn't impact the ability of Community getting down to a deeper level and doing some really good storytelling. But if everybody starts breaking that rule and starts winking at the camera, everything's going to fall apart. So I think really what we're saying here is about fourth wall humor and about, yes, it's, that you can get right. If you got that comic and you've got to put it up, you think you've got to put it up by today. You think you've got a deadline. And you're like, okay, I gotta get out of this moment. I'll have this person turn and wink at the camera because I know it's an easy out. I can make the joke happen in the fourth panel, and then I'll just figure something out tomorrow. And by the way, we've all been in that situation. There's not one of us that's not familiar with that. If you're being honest with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But know that unless you handle that fourth wall really, really correctly, if you've got the wrong character doing it, or if you dip back to that well over and over and over again, because you're really not pushing yourself as a humor writer, you can do yourself more harm than good. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, and it's funny that we ended up talking about fourth wall specifically, because I was meaning more specifically or more broadly that a story. One of the ways that a story, it works is when the characters, when the plot, when the world accepts and works with the weight of its own story rather than fights against it. And I like that term of belief, when a story believes in itself. But you're right to point out that the clearest example of that is when you unnecessarily and, in fact, unhelpfully break the fourth wall. When a story breaks its own belief in itself, for whatever quick payoff or joke or a winking nod that you get that's a success for that page, you undercut all the hundreds of other pages around it if it's not a mischief maker or magic making character that's doing it.
Right. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you how seriously I take those, because that's kind of been a philosophy of mine for a long time. I'll tell you how seriously I took it. For 4.5 years, I did a comic strip about a comic strip starring a gargoyle that knew it was a cartoon character, and I never broke the fourth wall.
Yes, that's true. You know what's funny now? As we're older, isn't it interesting how we can immediately see how chewy that concept was in terms of anytime you say it out loud, I'm like, oh, I see where 20-year-old Brad went wrong. Like you immediately know, like The pitch of Evil Inc. of it's an evil corporation run by and for supervillains. Bam, you're out. You're in. You're out. You're like it's
done.
You're done, right? But it's a comic strip. It's about a comic strip starring a guard. Like there's like 7 hats on that head.
So,
you know?
Yeah, there's so much to that, and I'm telling you, people tried to explain it to me. And that's why now, like, I find myself in this position where I'm like trying to talk to some maybe younger cartoonists and stuff. And this happens at college quite a bit, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to explain this to you, X, Y, and Z. And I see that same look on their face that is a desperation to be different and to stand out. And I know they're never going to take the advice that I give them. And for a half second, I'm furious, and then I realize that I did the exact same thing, and it's okay to give advice and to see it not being taken right now, because eventually your voice is going to be in the back of their head, and when it's the right time for them to come to grips with that, they're going to.
Right.
But it's very frustrating to give somebody advice and watch them just absolutely, you have no idea what you're talking about, old man. And I was just as guilty of it. And for all the same reasons, I wanted to stand out. I wanted to be different. My word balloons were a certain way because nobody else was doing them that way. Well, yep. I got news for you. There's a reason nobody else was doing them that way. They were horrible.
Right.
Same way I drew eyes, because no one else was doing it. Same reason. It was horrible. So yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, I give you credit as a teacher that you try to steer those 20-year-olds off of those missteps, because it's hard to steer someone off of a place where they have planted their flag. Like, no, this is what makes me unique. Is I'm Brad Geiger, 23-year-old Brad Geiger, and I'm writing a comic strip about a comic strip starting a gargoyle, and no one can tell me that this is too chewy.
Yeah.
But it takes 30-year-old Brad going, wait a minute, that was a little too chewy. What was I thinking? I don't know. Like, some of the stuff you can only teach yourself. You have to learn on your own, no matter how many teachers tell you, no matter how, there's certain, I don't know, there's certain moments in your life that you have to come to on your own. And bless you as a teacher, Brad, for trying to steer people off of those mistakes. But it's hard. It's hard to do it as a third party to steer them off.
I still remember this as if it was yesterday. I'm working the deadline night shift at the Akron Beacon Journal, and it was before I had started posting these on...
Look at Mr. Fancy Pants over here, the Akron Beacon Journal.
The Akron Beacon Journal. and I hadn't started posting anything on the web. I don't know that the web was really quite happening yet. This might have been 96, 97. But I was still working on this thing, and my best friend that was working the deadline shift with me was a big comics fan, so I'd bring stuff in and show him. And I one night I brought in this entire week of Greystone Inn. Dennis, I want you to see this. And he says, "Who's the cat?" And I said, "That's not a cat, it's a gargoyle. Those aren't ears, they're horns. And it's a gargoyle." He goes, "Why a gargoyle?" Because nobody else has ever done a gargoyle. He goes, "Cats and dogs are a lot more approachable." I said, "Yeah, and I don't want to do cats and dogs. There's been 100 cats, 100 dogs, never been a gargoyle. That's what I'm going to do." And he says, no, this whole idea, a comic strip within a comic strip, if people are reading these things one at a time, nobody's going to latch on to 1996, he's saying this.
Yeah.
And I go, "I know, but this is my concept." And he looked at me and he paused a minute and he said with love in his heart, 2 words. "Well, enjoy obscurity."
Oh, geez. That hurts me now.
It was, but if I'm being in a moment, I probably choked back a couple expletives, but holy shit, was he ever right?
No, he's right. That's why it hurt. The older me, it hurts because you want to save younger Brad a decade of trouble. You know what I mean? Like, I want to go back in time and be like, Brad, listen to him.
Listen to what he's saying.
Enjoy obscurity is right, because that, when someone cuts through with a great editorial note like that, but then again, there's all the critics that you're like, how do you know which one to filter out? It's hard. It's hard.
But
God.
Two words. In other words, you're going to be obscure. And as long as you enjoy that, if what you're drawing out of this is potent enough that it's going to overcome nobody's ever going to buy a book. Nobody's going to want to really read this to big numbers. But if you enjoy this whole idea of a gargoyle and this whole concept, if you really enjoy it, you can be obscure and it'll still be okay. Enjoy obscurity. Those two words were indelibly marked in my subconscious because the two words summed up everything. You can do this as long as you're prepared to enjoy the parts that have nothing to do with making a profit or getting an audience.
Enjoying a public. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But if you enjoy it, go nuts. It was the two best words of advice I ever got, and it took me years, if not a decade, to put them into action.
Yeah, and there's no, just in terms of putting a summary bow on this, it's hard for us now to be able to say to a 20-year-old, please trust me as older Dave, that I wish I could go back and tell younger Dave XYZ, so please listen to what I'm trying to tell you. Because it's so hard when someone stakes it out like you and I did as, this is our point of differentiation. This is what makes me unique about my cartooning. And we as older cartoonists are like, no, this is not working. Please trust us.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you can't steer that. It's like a slow moving ship. You gotta slowly, incrementally turn it. And frankly, the person themselves has to be the one to do it. It's hard. It's hard to be the third party steering them to better waters.
Yeah, it sure is.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, we have a very special guest on the show today. We are very excited to welcome Kat Farris on the show. Catifer is Kat's Twitter and Instagram handle at CATTIFER. And you can find Kat's work over at CATTIFER.com. And Kat, welcome on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, hey, thanks, guys. I am really excited to be on.
Well, we should say to the world that with all the best intentions, the microphone situation, not ideal in quarantine, right? But with a lot of love coming through the microphone, we are so happy to have you on here. So thank you again for doing this. I first met Kat forgive me if we had met previous to this, but I think the first time you and I had ever met was at the Alaska Comics Festival last year, right?
Yes, that's
I think we maybe had super briefly met at Emerald City once years ago, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But anyway, I liked Kat so much that I was like, I've got to go read Kat's work. And so I went and looked at My Boyfriend is a Bear, and it was the first book I read this year. I don't know if you caught that, Kat.
I did. I saw. I was honored.
And oh my gosh, I was delighted by your art style, by the fluidity of your line, by the expressiveness of your line, by your color palette, by the world you had created in this book. And I wonder, as a way to start in on the conversation with you, if you could talk a little bit about the process of that book specifically and how you came to it, how you decided on one style among the many that you can draw, and how that process worked out for you, like how that went.
Oh, man. Yeah, sure. Let's see. Bear is kind of a long story, and it has a lot of history before me. But it's been sitting around at Oni for a while. Actually, it had been sitting around at Oni for a while. I guess it's done now, clearly, since you read it. It was one of those books where I would mention to people that I was working on it, and someone would say, oh, yeah, I saw that kicking around Oni Editorial like 4 years ago. They just they had a hard time finding an artist for it. And at some point, Charlie Chu thought of me, and I got an email from him with the script attached to it. And he said, Kat, I have something. I think you'd be pretty good for it. I want you to read the script and tell me what you think. And I look at it and it says, My Boyfriend is a Bear. And I was like, okay, cool. I like weird stuff. I 30 pages into the script and immediately emailed Charlie and was like, Charlie, please tell me I'm not competing with anyone for this book because I have to draw it. I was so
Yeah.
charmed by Pam's script. It was hilarious. It was heartwarming. Like, I didn't even get all the way to the end. And as I was emailing Charlie to be like, I have to work on this book, I was like, gosh, I
That's
hope the
great.
ending is good because I didn't bother to read it. But
that's when Charlie says, I got some bad news for you. It doesn't have an ending yet.
Yeah. Or Charlie's like, so what did you think about Act 3? That Thelma and Louise ending wherever the bear goes off the cliff? That was okay by you? And you're like, wait, what? What happened?
luckily, it had a delightful, adorable, heartwarming ending.
It did, yeah.
But yeah, I did a couple of test pages for them. Pamela really liked my stuff, and I got the job. So I got to draw that amazing book. And I don't know what it is about Pam's sense of humor, but I think it must be somewhat similar to mine because I feel like we kind of got each other, even though we didn't have a lot of like times where we were communicating directly with each other.
Right.
I definitely felt like we were often on the same page.
So this was a unique kind of collaboration because basically you picked up something that was done and finished, and except for the rest of the process. So did you get in touch and talk back and forth, or at that point was it just you taking that script on and interpreting it?
We talked a little bit. I definitely took a trip down to LA to do some reference shooting because it was really important to Pam that it feel like it was set in Los Angeles, and I am a native Portlander up here in Oregon, so I don't really have a ton of experience with LA. My brother lives in Long Beach, and so I was like, Mike, I'm going to come visit you, and we are going to take like a couple of days. We're going to drive up to LA proper, and we're going to hang out in these areas from the script and gonna shoot a whole bunch of reference. He was like,
"Oh,
dope,
great!
Let's do it."
I gotta tell you, as an I guess a now native Los Angelino, it's been 21, 22 years. I don't know, when are you considered native? Is it 22 years? Is that fair to consider myself now native? I don't know. I'm no longer
weird.
a transplant.
It took me 20 years in this Philadelphia neighborhood for my neighbors to stop referring to me as the new guy.
Oh, man.
So I think it depends. I think it depends on the neighborhood.
That's like the Liberty Bell looks over you like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. But Kat, I got to tell you, so as a, I'm just going to say I'm a native Los Angelino. As a native Los Angelino, you nailed the look and the feel and the energy of Los Angeles. And your color palette is gorgeous for that Los Angeles feel. The way, the line quality of your backgrounds and of capturing LA, not only the exteriors, but the interior shots of her apartment has a very I mean, I know there's a sort of universality to what apartments look like, but there's a very specific quality that you gave her surroundings within Los Angeles in that apartment that I thought the whole thing just works so well. But can I ask you, with the test pages, had you already settled on a look by the time you submitted the test pages, or was that a conversation in progress? Like, how did that work for you?
Basically, they did what I've always wanted someone to do when I got hired for a comics project. They just let me do whatever I wanted.
Nice.
No one really gave me any direction. The most direction I had was actually in the script. Pam had listed her old address, and that is her real apartment that I drew from.
Oh.
Were you able to get inside?
She had a whole bunch of photos online saved in, like, I forget what the photo app was, but one of those photo apps, from the early 2000s where you store all your photos.
Flickr, LiveJournal, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was able to get interior shots from some of those photos that she had linked to the script. And then when I went down, we actually drove to the apartment and I took photos of the outside and I walked all around like a total creeper. My only
I love the idea of like you pressed against the window going, it's okay, I'm a cartoonist. Don't be creeped out, I'm just a cartoonist. This is fine.
Totally normal.
Hey, what are you doing? Are you having that baguette? Oh, that looks delicious.
I could imagine how uncomfortable you would be if you didn't know I was a cartoonist.
Yes, exactly. Well, I did have slight cover. There was a for rent sign on the apartment, so I could pretend that I was.
You could have gone inside pretending to want to buy it.
So I was like, well, hopefully they think I just want to rent, and I'm taking some photos to show like my friend or my roommate or whatever.
Right.
Oh,
so they gave you carte blanche to do the style, the look that you wanted to do. So then how did you you're sitting at your desk, that you love the first 30 pages because you could have gone a couple different paths. I actually could see different ways you could have drawn that story, but you chose a very specific path. And I'd like for you to talk about like how you found that on your own and why you went that route.
Oh man.
I mean, maybe that's too
I
far back in the past. I don't know,
No,
but
it's not too bad. It's just Bear was definitely my very first comics job that wasn't a licensed property, and before that, I had only worked on some Emily the Strange comics called Emily and the Strangers from Dark Horse, and
right.
they had a
Yeah.
very specific licensed style that I had to work within. And when I draw for fun, or at least back then when I was drawing for fun, I would draw a lot of like super deformed, like chibi style, like really, really, really cartoony things. And so I didn't really have a style that I thought of as my own for comics, but
Mm.
I knew that I couldn't get away with doing this book all chibis because that didn't feel right. And
Yeah.
I
Right.
didn't want to use necessarily the Emily style, but I'd worked on those books for so long that it had influenced a little bit of how I drew, not super cartoony. So I
Hmm.
kind of just started sketching to see what I thought was fun. I also read this comic series from France called Ernest and Rebecca,
Hmm.
which is
I don't know if I know
glorious.
that
I
one.
can't think of the names of anyone that have worked on that book at this point, but it's about a little girl who is sick all the time and she has a friend that is a virus, and they
Mm.
hang out together and her family is going through a rough time. But anyway, the cartooning and the coloring is incredible. And at first I was like, I really like this style. I like how everyone has a very distinct cartoony but believable solid face, and I wanted to try and bring some of that into
Yeah.
the book
Right. Right.
with the hopes of bringing in some of the really elaborate and gorgeous coloring later. Spoiler alert, that didn't quite happen. uh, Turns out it's really hard to imitate French cartoonists when you haven't been practicing very much. And also, the coloring was just, once I looked at it, it was so complex. I didn't have enough time to make my deadline.
Right.
But the Ernest and Rebecca definitely had, at the very beginning anyway, a somewhat of an influence and a style direction on what I was trying to do.
Yeah, because
Well,
Brad and I, before you joined us on the show, Brad and I were actually talking about stories that believe in themselves.
mhm.
And your art style is actually a really good example of this, Brad, because
Yeah.
for that book, there is a wonderful mix of, I think all three of us could agree, a cartooniness to certain actions that the bear does when his paw is like swiping, for example. It's
Yeah.
almost Warner Brothers Animaniacs kind of a feeling in that kind of paw motion. But then there's also very sweet, very realistic close-ups that work. And you have developed a world and a language in that story that believes in itself. Like it doesn't the bear being goofy doesn't negate the serious moments, and the serious moments don't negate the bear being sweet and goofy. You know what I mean? Like there's a natural play that works really wonderfully and beautifully in that story. And you walk such a great line in that story in mixing those two together. So it's really a doff of the cap to you on that. It's a beautifully done book. It really is.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad. I know there was a point when I was working on it, I was like, is anyone going to get this? Because I get it, and Pam clearly gets it, but like,
Yeah.
is anyone else going to feel it? And the response has been great. So I'm really relieved that the two of us were able to communicate exactly what we wanted through this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you had mentioned on the side there that the IDW, the Oni work, the Dark Horse work. So you've done freelancer for hire work, and describe for me the difference there for you as a cartoonist when someone says, "Match this style,
Mm.
do this house look." Can you try to pick up where this other artist left off? That kind of feeling. What kind of success strategies have you figured out that help you with that? Because that's very different than do whatever you want with Bear, whatever works for you. You know, that kind of thing.
Well, my initial career ambitions were animation. So when someone says match this style, like the animator in the deep core of myself is like, I can do it. Absolutely. It'll be flawless and you'll never notice. It'll be great. I'll stay on
Yeah.
model. But the cartoonist in me is like, I don't know, man. That seems like a lot of work. Like everyone, everyone brings their own flavor to a drawing, or at least I feel like most people do. I know I do. Like even when I'm
Yeah.
trying really hard to match someone else's style, I feel like I finish it, look at it, and go, God, it has like a me flavor to it, no
Yeah.
matter how hard I try and erase it. So
Yeah.
in actuality, it does get a little stressful. I usually ask for model sheets, and because it's comics, everyone looks at me and was like, "Uh, no, no model sheets. Just read the previous issues." And
That's what you get. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
oh, so that's also kind of stressful. But
Yeah.
it was really refreshing to work on Bear because they were. I turned in the sample pages, I turned in the sketches. I was waiting for notes, like, oh, well, we'd really prefer if it looked a little bit more like this, or we were thinking maybe that. And they were just like, this looks great, more like this. And I was like,
Keep up the good work.
should I? I felt like it needed fine tuning. So I was just like, okay, I mean, if you're happy, I'm happy because it was easy for me to draw this way.
Well, that was another question, I guess, to jump back on Bear was it's a style that's and I think it's fair to say it's a fluid, energetic, like flowing style. It's not there's not a rigidity to it like a Chris Ware kind of line style, you know.
Yeah.
But did that mean that you could crank out pages faster? Was it pretty quick for you to put out that book?
Yeah, it was. Knowing that while I was working, I could kind of just trust my instincts instead of have to go and hunt down like volume 3 and like look through this one sequence to make sure that like I was doing it with the appropriate feels. Like, no, if I think this feels right, then 99% sure that it's going to be right and everyone's going to like it. So it just made it so much faster.
So, Kat, you had mentioned growing up in Portland that animation was your hoped for goal. We should have maybe led with this, but what was your path to cartooning, like in junior high, high school, and beyond? Like, how did you was there formal animation training, or was that always just the hoped for goal was to go into
Well,
animation?
gosh, it was actually kind of a long, ridiculous road. I was supposed to be a veterinarian.
Sure, that old
Really?
story. Yeah, the
Yeah.
veterinarian who becomes a cartoonist.
Dave,
Yep, that.
another one of these.
Boy, that trope. Oh
Yeah.
man,
Oh,
if I
yep.
heard that, if I had a dime for every time I've heard that one.
I definitely grew up wanting to be a veterinarian for most of my life. At one point, I was like, I want to be a writer, but I kind of fell off of that and was like, no, I'm going to be a vet. It's going to be veterinary school for me. It's going to happen. Right up until junior year of high school, I was taking some art classes because I had some spare uh, credits. And I'd always liked to draw, and I'd always loved comics. And at one point in middle school, I thought, gosh, it would be fun to be a comic book artist, but I bet that's one of those fun jobs you don't get paid for because it's too fun. So I didn't really think it was a real job. And my parents, of course, didn't want to encourage me because my dad is a doctor, my mom is a teacher. My dad was afraid I would be penniless if I was an artist because, I mean, let's face it, most people aren't aware that art is a real career.
Right.
Yeah, little did
And
we
Right.
that's a
know
whole
how
other
many
discussion.
pennies you were going to have.
Exactly. But I was in art school or art classes in high school, and my art teacher took me aside and she was like, Kat, what do you want to do when you get out of here? And I was like, well, I'm going to go to vet school. And she was like, really? Is that what you really want? Like, well, I guess so. I mean, I've been saying it for what, like almost 18 years, so probably. And she dumped a stack of art college catalogs in front of me
Hmm.
and was like, have you considered a career in art? And I was like, is that a real thing? And she was like, yes, please look through all of these and come back and talk to me when you're done. And I flipped through a CalArts catalog and saw that you could, no kidding, get a bachelor's in animation. And I was like, oh my God, I could I could draw, but like for a living, and I could maybe make some money and I could go to college and get a degree. I bet I could sell my parents on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Oh, it was really hard to sell my parents on that, boy. Oh,
Oh, the
it was
story
not
took a
good.
turn there. I thought we were.
Yeah. Turns out just having an official degree wasn't enough for my dad. He was very against it until he
Yeah.
read in Forbes that animators at Pixar start out making approximately $60,000 a year. And then he was okay.
Oh, okay.
He's like,
So
this
once we got
isn't
the
reasonable
Forbes
salary.
stamp of approval, then that works
Yeah.
for.
That's the kind of man my dad is. They weren't sure what to do, but he didn't want me to be penniless, so he felt that okay, there's a career opportunity here that won't leave me living in a refrigerator box under a bridge. So
Right.
Right, right.
I
And
applied to CalArts and I didn't get in, and I took a year off and I applied to CalArts again and I didn't get in,
Really?
and then I applied to SCAD because they didn't actually have a portfolio requirement. I was like, well, maybe I'm not good enough for the portfolio. Maybe I just need some art school to help me out. And did get into SCAD, did get into their animation program. Spent 4 years. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Computer Art and
Wow.
Animation, I think is what the official title is, with a minor in drawing. Yeah. So
That's
supposed to be an animator.
for those that don't know, SCAD is Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah. Savannah is this gorgeous little city. You drive 10 miles outside of Savannah, and it's ding 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 ding. But in Savannah, it's this gorgeous, cute little town. And
when you get into Savannah, it's more like do 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 do.
What are we doing? What is this bit?
I'm
what
just
are we doing?
I don't know, but I like it.
A much seriouser song.
So what I was trying to say is Savannah College of Art and Design also has, I think, one of only 2 or maybe 3 programs in the country that offer sequential art as a program, but then they also have animation and pre-animation as programs. Were you there, Kat, when Scott Kurtz and I came down to give a talk, the big talk at the... Or was that before your... I don't know how many years ago that was.
The big talk. Certainly, they've been taught. Students have been passing down legend from generation to generation about the time that Dave came to SCAD.
Brad, if I could just briefly require you to fuck off for a second. I was trying to tell a story.
Go back to the big talk. I'm sorry.
No, for goodness sake, never mind. I didn't want to make this about me. I was just curious if.
I don't want to hear this story.
Never mind, Brad, taking the piss out of me. Never mind.
Go back to SCAD.
No, Kat. I'm going to speak specifically to you and ignore Brad. So Scott Kurtz and I went down to talk at SCAD, and they did a lovely job as a school of welcoming in guests, where they put us up in like some old mansion in downtown Savannah, and then they put us on stage in this big, gorgeous 1920s theater that could seat like 300, 400 people. Does this ring a bell for you for SCAD? It's like,
yes.
As an architecture program, Brad, one of the things they do is they buy old buildings and they redo them.
Wow.
Anyway, as far as places where I've guest lectured, man, SCAD was really nice. Although I've heard the tuition is far too high, right, Kat, as a student?
God, it's gotten worse. Like, I think the college president is the highest paid college president in the United States.
Wow.
What?
Really?
Yeah, she won that college in a divorce settlement.
Wait, what? Back up. There's a lot to unpack there. She won a college in a divorce settlement?
Yep.
Oh.
Wow.
That was the rumor, is that she acquired it in the divorce settlement. It used to be owned by her husband, and her husband was caught cheating on her. And when they split up, she got the school.
Why does this feel like an episode of Real Housewives? Like, what is this?
I mean, it might as well be, honestly. That the politics at SCAD are wild, super wild. The professors are so good. Good Lord. Like, I feel so lucky to have gone there. The politics were wild, but yeah, the people that took me under their wing in almost every class I had, there were a couple of weird professors that I would never want to have again. But like,
let's talk
there
about
were a
them.
lot of people that left. There were a lot of people that left good impressions on me, that like got me through this weird time in my life.
Yeah, and so did you feel overall like net benefit from having gone to SCAD, or because we get a question a lot on this podcast, Kat, about like whether art school is the right choice for. Hi, I'm 19 and I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And so you have a better experience than Brad and I, real world experience. And tell me, would you recommend art school for a certain kind of personality? Was that the right path for you as it turned out? Or would you have done things differently looking back now?
Well, let's see. I think it was the right path for me mostly. And I am very upfront with kids who ask me this too, because it was paid for me. I did not have to take out any loans.
Right.
As I mentioned previously, my dad is a doctor, and he felt very strongly that my brother and I should be able to go to a college of our choosing and not have to worry about it. So they'd been saving for college for us forever.
Right.
So I did not have to take out student loans. If I had to take out student loans, I can almost guarantee I would be singing a different tune. But also, I am the kind of personality that is not necessarily self-motivated when it comes to like just, I can look up YouTube tutorials or whatever. Like, I feel like I gained a lot of benefit from art school because I'm very competitive, and they create a very competitive atmosphere there where you finish your project, you put it up on the wall with all of your classmates, and you do a class critique. I learned a lot about taking critiques, which I don't think I would have learned if I'd just been working in isolation at home, just like doing internet tutorials, which was good for me because I was not very good at it to begin with, but now I am pretty reasonable at it.
Yeah.
or at least have learned to just like hide all the anger and sadness inside and go, oh, yes, thank you very much.
So art school teaches you to bury that down and behind a smile. That's good. Yeah, it's a good life strategy. Bury it, bury it. Yep.
So now, Kat, speaking of your parents, they came back around. They were not fans of this career decision to begin with. How do they feel about your success today?
I think they're proud of me. I think in some ways they don't quite get it. Like it's easier for them to be proud of my brother because he has a master's in marine biology and is a professor, and they know how to deal with that. They know like what
Right. They
kind
know
of
how to
success that
process it.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
but for me, I mean, I think they're proud, but I don't think they quite know, how to process it. That's probably right. I
Yeah, so
did.
for like when Bear came out and it started getting all these critical reviews that were amazing and got all the critical rave, they didn't know how to parse that, like where this is coming from, who these people are that are saying these nice things, what
Mhm.
this means in the industry. Is that what you're saying? Like they don't have a sense of what the broader scope of comics are.
Yeah,
That
like
that
they don't know what success looks like for a comic artist.
yeah. That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
Although I will say that this year Bear was nominated for an Oregon Book Award, and that got some notice from my parents
Oh, good.
Oh,
because
good,
that popped
good.
up in the Oregonian, and people at church accosted them, and they were like, Becky, we saw Kat's name in the paper. Her book is up for some award." And my mom called me. She's like, "So, Joni at church said that she saw your name in the paper. That my boyfriend is a bear is nominated for some award, the Oregon Book Awards." And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "That's so wonderful."
Oh man, thank you, Joni, for passing that along. Man, that
They
You
were going
don't
to get
know.
tickets to go to the award ceremony, which is
Oh,
not
really?
happening thanks to COVID. But
oh.
they were very proud of me. I think that was it was a measure of success they could understand because
Yeah.
people at church had heard about it.
Let's face it. There's something to be said for the church goer approval. When it comes to parents, where somebody walks up to them and says, "Oh yeah, I read this thing." It all of a sudden that has a real mark of realness to it, whereas before it was kind of ephemeral.
Yeah, when someone walks up to Brad's mom at church and says, "So I saw Brad's work," Brad immediately from 4,000 miles away starts flop sweating. Brad immediately gets nervous.
delete.
No, Mom, walk away. Mom, go to the back of the church. No, Mom, run.
My mother has strict rules on if she hears anybody saying, "I saw what your son did on the internet," she's supposed to turn and walk away.
Oh my gosh.
Well, so to round out the conversation today, Kat, one thing I want to talk to you about before you go was the Ghoul Next Door. So tell us a little bit about, or what you're allowed to say in advance of the book dropping, but how this project came about, how it was to work on it, and what you're excited for people to see in the book, that kind of thing.
Oh man, I feel like Ghoul Next Door is a culmination of everything I wanted for myself in comics. It's kind of a dream project that was orchestrated by my agent, Charlie Olson. Bless him, that sweet man, for finding me this job. He also represents Cullen, and at some point when I was done with Bear and looking for more work and not having a whole lot of luck, Charlie wrote me and he said, "Okay, so you told me you wanted to do horror stuff. How do you feel about doing a book with Cullen Bunn?"
Mm.
And for me, I definitely like screamed.
Mm-hmm.
Not on the internet, thankfully, because it was over an email, and then composed myself and was like, yes, actually, I definitely would like to do
Yeah.
that. Thank
That
you.
critique class came in handy again. That was great. Okay, yeah.
You were able to repress. Very good.
Because I've been a fan of Cullen's work since he was working on The Sixth Gun,
Right.
which is what got
Yeah.
me back into reading American comics after taking years and years off.
Mhm.
And I've really been a fan of his series with Tyler Crook, Harrow County, which is just the most delicious and gorgeous horror book I've seen in a long time, thanks to Cullen's writing and Tyler's amazing watercolors. So getting to work with Cullen on a middle grade horror book is just, it's a dream come true. That's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
he called me and he's like, "I'm only interested in doing like middle grade horror. I hope that's okay with you." I was like, "Yes, go on, continue." And I am doing it in a watercolor style, which
Wow.
I wish looked like Tyler's, but it doesn't. It looks like me, but with watercolor, which is great because those little watercolor hibernation sequences in Bear were so much fun to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I decided that if I did another book, I wanted to do it the whole thing watercolor because I had just so much fun. It would be so great. Like, what could go wrong? It would be awesome. And
What could go wrong?
And there's no way water can spill or that.
Yeah,
There's no
I love
potential
that
for
confidence. I'm looking at these pages on catafire.com. They're gorgeous. There is nothing that can go wrong.
oh, well, I'm glad you feel like that. I think those are the pitch pages that we put together when we were shopping it around.
Yeah.
And it's been picked up by HarperCollins. I think their middle
Hooray.
grade line is called Harper Alley, and it's going to come out next summer at some point. I don't know if we have an exact date, but summer 2021 is in my brain. So at some point, summer 2021, people will be able to see The Ghoul Next Door. I have
Yeah.
finished work on it as of maybe 3 weeks ago. And it was
That,
100
oh, wow. Congratulations. 3 weeks ago. That's super fresh.
yeah, it was 192 pages of watercolor art. So it took a while. It took quite a while.
So how eager are you to start your next watercolor project?
Well, volume 2.
Here I was asking a sarcastic question, but now you're a victim of your own success. You got to go right back to that watercolor.
Yeah, they signed us for 2 books. So
Wow.
the second book is coming out at some point. I don't know when, but I have to get started on it whenever Cullen finishes script 2. So sometime in the
Good
next
for
month
you.
or so, I'll be back to the grind.
That's great,
fantastic.
though. That's great, though, for your future. How exciting for you. Okay, so that one comes
really
out in 21, in summer of 21, and the next one will probably come out in summer of 23, probably, or something like that?
I think they'll probably do it a little bit sooner than that. I think part of the reason the first book is getting so delayed is they want to drop the first and second book somewhat close to each other.
Oh, yeah,
So
okay.
initially, I was supposed to be finished with the art for the second book August of 2021. I think it's due to COVID and everything else. It's probably going to get a little bit delayed, but yeah, I assume the 2 books will be closer to each other than the first one is from us now, hopefully, because yeah, summer of 2023 would be a long ways out.
Oh, God. So
Yeah.
there's
But
all
I don't
kinds of
know
things
exactly.
to be looking forward to in summer 2021. We've got the Ghoul Next Door. Dave, your quarantine haircut is going to look normal by then.
Probably not, Brad, if I keep doing it. It's not going to get better. Oh, Kat, you can't really tell, but I gave myself a haircut for the first time in quarantine,
Wow.
and I look like a drill sergeant at Camp Pendleton. I got this high and tight, and I used to cut my hair in college, so I thought I remembered how to do it. I don't remember how to do it.
Oh
No.
no.
It's really patchy in the back. I look like I'm not good.
Oh. Well,
You look like you stumbled and fell into a weed whacker.
I mean, you have your headphones on and you're on a tiny screen, so to me you look normal.
Thank
I was
you,
look at
Kat.
He's looking very, very clean and tidy for being in quarantine for so
Where
long.
was Brad with that kind of compliment? Thank you, Kat. Thank you.
Well, at our house, my husband and I only know one haircut, and it's his. So we both gave ourselves the same haircut.
Well, that is delightful. I gotta say, I'm so happy that we were able to work out with this conversation today to have you on the show because it is delightful to talk to you. Honestly, it was my first and frankly my best read of 2020. I can't recommend My Boyfriend Is a Bear enough.
Aw.
It was delightful and heartwarming and moving and had energy and flow in the line work that was delightful. I can't sing enough praises. Make sure you check out Kat's work on Twitter and Instagram at Cattifer, Cattifer, or at cattifer.com. And look out for The Ghoul Next Door in 2021.
yeah.
And Kat, thank you for coming on the show. You are awesome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's been an absolute delight. It's really great to talk to people.
Oh, God, isn't that true?
That's how long you've been in quarantine. You actually think Dave and I are people.
Oh,
Dang.
we had the cell phone on that one. All right. Oh, thank you, Kat. You are wonderful.
Dave, as always, it's time for thanks for the kind words here on ComicLab. We're sharing some of the nice things that folks have been saying about the podcast, and this one I had to share with you. This comes from Twitter. comes from one of our listeners who goes by the handle SnipeJag. And this person says, a couple of weeks ago, Fly in Your Soup and I listened to an episode of ComicLab podcast with Ngozi from 2018 while we were on a Zoom date. Today, I listened to the to-do list organization section and remodeled how mine is thanks up. Thanks for the great experiences. Dave, we chaperoned a Zoom date and we didn't even know it.
Brad, I don't know if you can see this. My cheeks are genuinely flushed with joy. That's really, there's a lot of sweetness to unpack here. That two people were listening together, which I don't know that we've ever had anyone mention that before, that they listened together. Oh no, we have had couples that
we've had couples that say we saved their marriage.
We have had that. We've never had someone that did it as a dating activity, which is so sweet. Like the wholesomeness level is through the roof on that. And through Zoom in quarantine. Oh, Brad, my heart. Oh, I can't take this much. This is sweet.
I mean, it's sweet, and it's also like, okay, this is where we're at now in society. Zoom dates. I mean, this is. Could you imagine being a young person today who's unattached? You got to do a Zoom date. Although I guess it's a little easier to pick up the tab, but still. Zoom dates.
He had to get it in. He had to get the joke in. Had to get the joke in.
Get it, pick up the tab because you're on a browser. But
no, I didn't. I actually didn't get that joke. Oh, God bless America.
But seriously, I almost wanted to. I might have to do a Zoom date with my wife just to find out what that's like. It sounds like it would be fun.
You know what? My heart is both grieving at the fact that people do have to do that. If you're like in a dating place in your life, that is what you have to do. But it also is hopeful that I know it's stupid to quote Jurassic Park, but life finds a way. Like it, you know what I mean? It is people find a way to connect, and it's sort of beautiful that even in a quarantine world, we are reaching out through Zoom and listening to ComicLab as part of the date. That's delightful.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, we're going to have to stop calling it quarantine. As my friend Alice on Twitter says, we're not in quarantine. We're all artists in residence.
Oh, Brad, I can finally say I'm an artist in residence. Hello. Oh, I can do this. I can do this voice again. What a pretty party. Oh, yes.
I'm an artist in residence.
I'm an artist in residence residing in Los Angeles. Yes, hello. Oh. Yes.
I've always wanted to be an artist in residence. I think that would be such a great gig.
There is one, it would be fun. I want to do it with you, but there's one in Angoulême, France, where they give you an apartment and a tiny stipend to live in Angoulême and be a cartoonist just in Angoulême. And I think that would be so fun. As someone who doesn't speak French, it would be just a gas to go live in France for 6 months as an artist in residence and walk in and do my croissant order that no one understands, where I get the almond croissant instead of the butter, ham and cheese croissant.
I mean, we would spend an entire, what is it, for a year or a month? It's got to be for a year.
I think it's a year. Yeah,
I don't know that I could live an entire year eating only omelette du fromage, because that's the only thing I know how to say. Cheese omelette. Omelette du fromage.
Bonsoir, je vous ai un croissant, s'il vous plaît. Ouais. That's the extent of my French. But as far as being an artist and resident, anyway, to summarize, what kind words, and I hope the date went well. It sounds like it did. That's delightful. You have warmed my heart with that tweet. So thank you for those kind words.
You'll have to let us know if you get a second date.
Oh, that's the kicker of whether ComicLab brings a second date.
And what do you listen? Okay, now listen. They listened to the organization show and they listened to the Ngozi interview, and that first date went well. Dave, you've got to select an episode for them to listen to on the second date, because now this is when decisions are starting to get made. What do you, as a wine connoisseur, as a what do you call those guys? Sauvignons.
Sommelier.
Sommelier. What do you select for this person to choose for his second date episode?
Well, provided the both of you enjoyed that first interview with Ngozi. Was that from 2018, by the way? Boy, how time flies.
I think it's going
I
all
honestly
the way
thought
back.
that was 3 months ago. That's amazing. I would maybe choose, and I don't know if it's a Patreon exclusive, but the best of episode from 2019.
Oh, yeah.
That one is fantastic. That one is great.
Flip over all the cards. That's the one you got to listen to. You listen to that best of episode where we've got Do You Want to Be in Sci-Fi and and all those moments from the show. That's it. That's it.
And listen, I can guarantee you with that Zoom date that you will absolutely not get to first base too. So you might as well enjoy and have a laugh.
Yeah, it's not like, exactly, because a lot of times on the second date, you don't want to be too funny, because then when you say, hey, I think I'd like a kiss, she thinks you're making another joke, and she's laughing. It's like, no, the joke said it about 30 seconds
and then
ago.
It's just immediate weeping. No, I'm being very serious. Oh, God. Oh, I've ruined it again.
That was always my trouble dating as a young man. I was always going for the laughs. I was never going for the kisses. So I would go in, do a tight 5 minutes, get to a point where she was good and laughing and thinking, literally, Dave, I'm not making this up. I thought this thought. I got her good and laughing. It's never going to get better. And then stand up, thank her, and left. because I had gotten the big laugh.
Can I share?
Else to go.
Can I share this with the world? It's sweet and endearing about Brad that he thought the problem was that he had his dates laughing too much. He thought that was the problem. I can tell you right now, he's on video chat. I can tell you what the problem was. The problem was not that he had him laughing too much.
The problem was finally that poor woman in the college dorm thought, well, maybe if I laugh really, really hard this time, he'll get the point and leave. And
Brad,
finally,
have you ever watched March of the Penguins and you laugh at the goofy penguin that keeps slipping and falling? And you have a good laugh. You have a good chuckle. But then do you ever find yourself aroused by that penguin? No, Brad. The goofy penguin is not... You're not getting to first base with the goofy penguin.
Yeah, well, speak for yourself.
Oh, we're learning a lot about Brad.
Oh, well, this is as good a place as any for me to say you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about getting interested in penguins and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, apparently the penguin connoisseur and the creator of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my penguin-hating friend, Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, where there is a duck, not a penguin, you'll notice, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
I'm not angry at penguins. One just jilted me at the altar. That's all. It hurts. It still hurts all these decades later.
You're an anti-penguite.
The ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode and all episodes was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media. And today's show brought to you by the good folks at Wacom over at wacom.com, the makers of the new Wacom One.
And if you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may even hear your review featured on a future episode.
And we need an update on date number 2, please.
Yes.
We're not joking about that. We need this. We need this.
We need something.
So let us know how date number 2 went. And also, I will let you know this. ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/ComicLab.